Hi, it's Dennis Daly. I've posted over 100 excerpts from some of my more than 250 American montage shows that I did in the 1980s and 90s while at UPI Radio. Recently, I embarked on a fresh series of shows, and here's the first half of one of my new American Montage interviews. My guest this week is longtime broadcaster and TV historian Scott CRAMER, who is not an official historian, but he owns one of the biggest collections of DVDs around. He gets accused of living in the past, and he likes it. He joins us from upstate New York. Scott, there's a wonderful thing that has happened, though, for people who want to collect those old TV shows, and I'm talking about the availability of DVDs now.
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, Dennis, the DVD market has really caught on fire, and people can go back to the 40s and the 50s and, really go back and take a look at some of the early broadcasts of television. They call radio theater of the mind. Well, television, did what, radio couldn't, and that was bring to life the pictures or the images that people were thinking of.
And the funny thing about that, and I'm not cutting them down because they were inventing television as they went, is that so many of those early shows, particularly on the Dumont network, were so incredibly low budget, they might have well have left something to your imagination.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you talk about having a 5-cent budget. They did in those days, and they showed it.
Absolutely. We're talking about, of course, television really beginning only in the major cities and only after World War II got over. I guess 46, 47 must have been the first really big years for television.
You had stations, of course, in Chicago and New York and L.A. They were the big markets, test markets for what was to come. Now you just have a plethora of not only TV stations that are off the air, but also, when I say off the air, meaning not cable.
You can pick them up as what we call standard broadcast.
Correct. I just got cable installed here. 500 channels. Imagine that. And on a Sunday afternoon, not anything to watch.
One of the things we forget about with those 500 channels is that they're largely run by computers. If these were the old days before computers, they couldn't afford to have that many because it would take thousands of technicians sitting around to thread everything up and push all the buttons. But this stuff pretty much happens automatically, and I seldom see a mistake on those cable channels.
No, they're pretty well maintained, pretty well kept up and run to spec, because, that keeps viewers' attention. Wanted to just go back and say about, early days of television, when you had kinescope. Most of the television for that part was live.
It's hard to imagine today with everything all sweetened up, and in post-production they fix all the mistakes, that these performers had to be darn good.
Oh, yeah. It was, you had to be on cue, you had to be on your mark, but when there was a foul-up, if it was a drama, they tried to stay straight-faced, or if it was a comedy, as you saw in later years, like on the Carol Burnett Show, Harvey Korman or Tim Conway, they couldn't help but crack up laughing.
Scott, looking at those very early shows, what were your favorites and why?
I like Howdy Doody. Remember Howdy Doody?
Oh, absolutely.
Clarabelle the Clown. And Gunsmoke stands out as one of the earliest back in 1955 when it first started, and John Wayne, who was asked to play the part of Marshal Matt Dillon, as it made its transition from radio, where William Conrad had the part, and James Arness, who just recently passed away. So Gunsmoke is, it's venerable. It still runs today, but it's my favorite because, of the stories. They were well written. You had, it was great entertainment, and the characters. The characters just melted together. They just came like Doc Adams and Festus.
Oh, I know we want to talk about Gunsmoke after a while, but what great chemistry you often had between the people in those shows. I'm picturing in my mind Jackie Gleason and the actress who played his wife, Alice. It was as if they weren't acting. You were just kind of looking in on them.
No, after actors do a show for so many years, it becomes just like real life. It's like they're married. You're talking about like Audra Meadows and, her and Jackie Gleason. They just had a great time doing what they did. And, again, most of that was live. And early television, there's nothing that beats it at all, because what you have today on television, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little later as well, I don't think it's not even in the same league. You can't compare it, and it needs to go into the recycle bin.
Well, yes, and it's very difficult for people today to look, particularly young kids, to look at older television, because for their mind it seems incredibly slow and plodding. And I've even heard of some young people who say that they can't see black and white, which I think is probably the biggest cop-out of all time.
You put up an episode of Howdy Doody in front of kids today, and I'm sure 9 out of 10 of them probably will fall asleep, get bored, or be doing something else, because it doesn't keep their attention. But back in the day, when I grew up, Howdy Doody, Captain Kangaroo, those were the shows that really, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, they made my day, and they made life a lot easier. Television made life a lot simpler, much as radio did.
All this stuff we seem to see today for kids is that slam-bang kind of animation that's just mind-numbing.
And it's not a well-known fact that a lot of today's cartoons, such as King of the Hill, Family Guy, The Simpsons, they're all drawn and made in Japan. And then they're brought back here where the voices are put on. And a lot of cartoons today, you're right, are just hard to understand. There's no reasoning, and there's a lot of violence. I mean, you had cartoon violence back in the day with Tom and Jerry and the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, and cartoons were just, amazing back when, with the Flintstones and the Jetsons, and we could go on with the list. And some, if there's a young person listening to this program, they're saying, "What is he talking about?" But thank goodness Turner not only has a Cartoon Network where he puts on some of those newer shows, but he also has another cable channel called Boomerang, and they keep on running a lot of the old cartoons, including the Yogi Bear Show and Huckleberry Hound and Magilla Gorilla, and just name it, and it's on there, from Scooby-Doo to... So, yeah, they are preserved, and now even more so, as you mentioned before, on DVD. I have a huge collection of DVDs, and I treasure them just so much.
Scott, there's so many things I want to talk about in this hour, but before we go into some of the individual shows in old-time television, let's talk about what those shows do to you. Now, I've been accused by my friends of living in the 50s and the 40s because of old-time radio. They say, well, society has changed. Well, my answer to that is, I like it back there. You once told me that one of the things you like about old-time television, it allows you to escape to this gentler era. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It's a comfortability zone. And what I mean by that is it's escapism. You watch a show, like I love Emergency and Adam 12 or Hawaii 5-0. I put on an episode of that, and I just get so intrigued. It's exhilarating, and, you turn off the phone, and you just turn off the light, and you sit there and you watch, and for an hour, you are entertained, and they do a heck of a good job.
And I think the fun thing about that is even though you've seen those episodes 1,000 times, even though I have heard some of my favorite radio episodes 1,000 times, it's like watching It's a Wonderful Life. You can watch it 1,000,000 times and still cry at the ending.
You never get tired of watching the same shows. The shows that I enjoy, there are many of them. I mean, there is a huge selection. So, the time I get back to watching the show that I had watched maybe 6 months ago, it's just amazing. It's like, and then I see things. This always happens, right? You watch a movie or you listen to an old radio show and you watch your TV show and, wow, I didn't notice that before. It's something new. So it's always reinventing, I guess, and reinvigorating to watch these programs.
While you were talking about that, one name came to mind, and I don't have any notes here about him, and you may not have the information at the tip of your tongue, but that was the producer Quinn Martin. I mean, there was a period of time when nearly all the good drama shows came out of his house.
Yes, Barnaby Jones. How about that? The Streets of San Francisco, Cannon. They were all Quinn Martin.
I wonder if anybody would have thought that Buddy Ebsen would have resurrected his career after being, of course, in The Wizard of Oz and then Beverly Hillbillies, and suddenly he shows up as a detective. I mean, it was wonderful. I love that show.
It's funny you say that because I just remember other actors doing, Andy Griffith coming back and doing Matlock, Dick Van Dyke coming back and doing Diagnosis Murder. And having long runs. Angela Lansbury, Murder, She Wrote. And it's kind of funny that these all have the same theme. They're all murder mysteries. But you're putting comedians in these roles, and they're just superb.
Well, and I think a lot of people would have said, oh, come on. Andy Griffith will always be Sheriff Taylor. The public will not accept him as anything else. He's too typecast, but Matlock was a huge, long-running show.
It was very, very popular during its time and was one of the groundbreaking shows that led way to many of today's cop shows.
Scott, there were some shows that I had a very interesting origin. You, I'm sure, can talk to this better than I, but they were the shows. McCloud comes to mind, where they initially were not on every week. They were part of a stable of 3 or 4 shows that rotated.
Right, that was called the Big Event, and that was during the 70s and early 80s on NBC. You had McCloud, you had Heck Ramsey, and you had McMillan and Wife, and then later they added The Invisible Man, and these all rotated. And, of course, Heck Ramsey, you remember the star, he was playing in Have Gun Will Travel.
Richard Boone.
That's right. Okay.
Wonder whatever happened to him.
He probably went where most all great actors end
I'll
up.
have to see if he's still alive here. Let me tell my listeners I'm cheating by going on the internet. Here he is. No, died in 81. I'd forgotten about that.
Take a look at Have Gun Will Travel, and what a show. It was, once again, a long running. If we could talk for a couple of minutes about the eras that we have. Today we have reality television. The 50s and the 60s, Westerns dominated television. There was at least 23, 24 different Westerns on during one season.
Wow.
And it was just saturated. You had on NBC Bonanza, which was their answer to Gunsmoke. It ended up running 14 seasons. So, and very, very popular.
And I don't think any of us realized till later how ill Lorne Greene was with an incredible back problem through much of that show. He had to lean up against a slant board when he wasn't in a scene. I mean, a wonderful actor, tremendous voice, used to do radio in Canada. He was kind of Canada's Walter Cronkite after World War II, but you look at those episodes, you can kind of see him wince sometimes when he moves around.
a lot of those stars in those days did their own stunts. You look at Robert Conrad in the Wild Wild West. He was injured, but decided he was going to keep going with the show. And, you look at Peter Graves, who was James Arnett's brother. He did a lot of his own stunts on Mission Impossible, and he didn't join until the second season.
Well, the actor who played MacGyver would later go on to say that he was really in pain a lot after that show was over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you look, Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck did his stunt. But today, once again, as I mentioned, because of insurance reasons, a lot of the stars don't do their own stunts. You see NCIS and CSI and, what the next show this coming fall is XYZ. They don't do their own stunts anymore.
And the amazing thing, too, I remember in a conversation with Will Hutchins for this series, he was, of course, Sugarfoot, and he admitted that the show was okay, but that most people only remember the show because they can sing Sugarfoot, Sugarfoot. He was only paid, believe it or not, $250 an episode.
Oh, yeah. Compared to today and what actors get, it's unbelievable. It's all about money right now and all about ratings.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to me that even though the networks wanted to make money, they didn't really push the envelope. They did not feel they had to show scantily clothed women. They didn't have the men have their shirts off all the time. It was an era of entertainment when a 5-year-old could sit with his grandmother and watch a show and neither one of them be embarrassed.
I look at 2.5 Men, and I've only watched maybe 15 minutes of an episode, and I had to turn it off because of the content. It's not Leave It to Beaver, and 90% of these shows aren't family-oriented, even though they say they are, but it's hard to believe CBS and the other networks have gone in the direction that they have.
And Scott, you're about a decade younger than I am, I think, but yet you have seen the changes in your lifetime. Money talks, money talks, nobody walks. You bring it, we ring it, our till is nil, it needs a fill, as one company in New York City used to say. In reading about your love of old-time television, I notice your favorite show of all time is Emergency. Tell us about that show and how important it is in the history of modern-day television.
Well, as you know, it was a Jack Webb production, and for many seasons, it really captivated audiences, especially those in the firefighting community, because it used groundbreaking technology. And still to this day, there are fire departments that will use it as training footage. The rescues were just amazing. And not only did you have Jack Webb writing and putting his input in, but you had a gentleman named Senator who also oversaw, directed many of the episodes. The fire department where Station 51 located is dedicated to Mr. Senator.
Scott, I read once that a lot of people go there, and it's kind of become a tourist, not a tourist trap, but a lot of fans of Emergency have tried to find that fire department. It's kind of off the beaten track, I understand.
No, I've been there. I've had my picture taken there, and no, it's actually, it's Engine 127, and it's located in Carson, California.
Well, in a way, there's something really special about the fact that that is a real fire department, firehouse that's still being used, because it was integral to Emergency, but people can, I guess, stand on the other side of the street and watch the fire trucks go in and out.
Absolutely. And it's nice. It's a tourist attraction. And, but Emergency had the realism. You felt that, you were there and you were really going on the calls with these people. I remember watching one episode, and the ambulance had an accident, and the engine was right before them, going before them. So what they did was they took the patient out of the ambulance and put him on the engine and took him to the hospital that way.
Well, I remember viewing that one episode one time, and I was amazed that not only were the real actors riding on the top of this speeding fire truck, but the camera people were there, the sound people. They should have got hazardous duty pay.
Oh, yeah. You talk about your hazard duty pay. They earned it, dangling from towers and cliffs and bridges and having to do underwater things. And we mentioned earlier in a segment talking about doing your own stunts. They were up on a tower. No, that's just a prop. And then they showed a long shot from the bottom, and they were really up there.
Well, I would assume with Jack Webb being such a stickler for accuracy and the fact that the two actors were actually out there doing this and they wanted to show the new technology, they must have taken a lot of special training before they even filmed the first episode.
They did. They went for hours and hours to classes. Randolph Mantooth, who played John Gage, and then Roy DeSoto, who was played by Kevin Tighe. And it's just amazing. They learned an awful lot of stuff. In a very short time, that series ran for 6 years. And also, they did several movies afterwards.
And wasn't that series pretty well responsible for first L.A. and then a lot of other cities getting those kinds of paramedics as part of their fire departments?
It was the first movie that introduced the series that opened up a whole new era for the rescue field. John Gage and Roy DeSoto really fought with the L.A. County Board of Supervisors to get that program implemented, and once it was finally given the okay, then they had to prove themselves. And once they started doing that, it was groundbreaking, and then other big cities followed: Seattle, Chicago, and then New York.
Well, the episodes I've seen, and again, it's the influence of Jack Webb, are so realistic, even showing the tedium of the firemen, the guys talking together at a time when nothing's happening. And that was a hallmark of all of what Jack Webb did. He showed that there was this rock'em sock'em fun and danger sometimes, but other times it was just everyday life at the firehouse.
Yeah, it just dictated real life, what you did back at the firehouse. You made supper and burned it, or, you were trying to start your own business or something like that, and, getting other people involved in the station, and that's what happened. And when there was a call, you dropped everything and took care of it.
The second half of this interview is also posted here on YouTube. I'm Dennis Daly.